now, before we move on to looking at Mahayana Vipashyana in terms of the emptiness practice, is do another Vipassana practice, this time particularly focusing on this idea of no self and using a sort of different approach than what we've just been using. So remember, this idea of autonomous self is that instinctively we have a sense that somewhere here is a me. And this me that seems to be here seems to be something more than just the body and the mind. There seems to be something extra, something sort of that stands apart a little bit from the body and the mind. A me, a self that is trying to run the show, you know, a me that is trying to control or subdue this body and control the mind. We really have this instinctive sense of this autonomous self. So what we're going to do in this meditation is have a look and see if we can find this autonomous self. So that's what we're going to do now. So let's find a nice comfortable posture. We begin, as always, by preparing the body, setting it into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. Allow the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. And setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. Not dwelling in the past, not anticipating the future. Simply allowing the mind to rest in the present moment. Focusing on the sensations of the breath throughout the body. Now, do you have a sense that there's a me here who is trying to relax the body, and a me who is trying to focus the mind on the breath? A me that doesn't seem to depend upon anything else to exist. Do you have this experience? Where is this me who is trying to be the master or controller of this body and mind? Where is the me who is trying to relax the body? Is the body simply trying to relax itself? Or is there a me separate from the body who is trying to relax the body? If there seems to be a me separate from the body who is trying to relax the body, where is this me? So search thoroughly and see if you can find the me who is trying to relax the body. And where is the me who is trying to focus the mind on the breath? Is the mind simply trying to focus itself? Or is there a me separate from the mind who is trying to focus the mind? If there seems to be a me separate from the mind who is trying to focus the mind, where is this me? So again, search thoroughly and see if you can find the me who is trying to focus the mind on the breath. Now, in your direct experience, what is actually here? There is the constant flow of physical change that is called the body. And there is the constant flow of mental experience that is called the mind. But apart from the body and the mind, what else is there here? If there's nothing more than the body and the mind here, where is the me who is trying to relax and train this body and mind? However, it's undeniable that there's someone who's experiencing all of this. But how can this me exist if we don't seem to be able to find it? The me exists as something merely labeled on the basis of the body that is sitting here and the mind that is focusing on the breath. Nothing more than this. The merely labeled me is trying to bring this body and mind under control. And then release all appearances and simply allow the mind to come to rest. Simply resting in the experience of awareness itself. Simply being aware of being aware. Did anyone find the self? I'm still looking, so I need some help.
So what does it mean to find? Because if I look for a self, there is no self. But if I look for my mind, I can't seem to find the mind either. It's as illusory as everything else.
Correct.
So it seems
very good.
Okay.
That is the view we're about to come into.
Okay.
And I think the answer will come in the discussions either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Okay, so now I'd like to go to the Mahayana. So far we've been looking at the Vipassana practice at the level of Theravada practice, where the goal is nirvana. The three things we're trying to come to realize is impermanence, dukkha, and no self. On that basis now, we're going to look at the Mahayana tradition, the Vipashyana practice, which is talking about primarily this practice of emptiness, coming to realize there is no independent me, no independent objective world. So this idea of emptiness is talking about the fact that things are empty of independent existence. Things do not independently exist. So this word independent existence is talked about here in the text using a number of different terms. Probably the most common term that you'll see is the word inherent existence. Inherent existence has the idea that things are self-existent. They exist within themselves. They have their own unique nature, that the world is already divided up into many separate, discrete things. The second term that is often used is existing from its own side. So the idea of things existing from their own side has the connotation that they do not require an observer for them to exist. They exist completely from their own side. That things are already existing and we're just coming along and confirming that existing, that they already exist from their own side. And then another term that is often used is true existence. The word true generally means something is true if it doesn't deceive us. And so true existence means that things appear to us to exist independent of us. And if in fact they existed in that way, they would be true, meaning the way in which they appear and the way in which they exist match. They're not deceiving us. So true existence simply means existing in the same way in which it appears. So these are three words or terms that are commonly used, all describing this idea of independent existence. There are other terms used as well, but these are probably the three most common terms. Now, this view of emptiness is basically saying that things are not independently existent. And that's usually described with the following statement. that things are empty of inherent existence, meaning things are not independently existent. Why? And one of the most common reasons that's used to establish this fact is because things are dependently existent. And the term there is dependent arisings. So the word arising here means coming into existence, that things come into existence dependently. So again, things are empty of inherent existence, or in other words, things are not independently existent because they are dependently existent. So this phrase here, empty of inherent existence, this is emptiness. Or in Sanskrit, shunyata. So emptiness is not saying nothing really exists. You know, often we hear people say, oh, it doesn't matter because everything's empty. That's completely the wrong understanding of emptiness. Actually, the correct understanding of emptiness, as we're going to see, is because things are empty, therefore things matter. That's the logic, actually, the correct logic. But here we're having, so here things are empty of inherent existence. They're not independently existent because they are dependently existent. So again, emptiness is describing the nature of reality in terms of how things do not exist. So emptiness is saying things are not independently existent. Why? Because they are dependently existent. So if we can understand a little bit better, what do we mean for things to be dependently existent, that will help us to understand really what emptiness means. So that's what we're going to do now, is have a look at how things are dependent arisings. How do things come into existence dependently?
Would it be correct to use the pair absolute and relative to replace inherent?
I personally don't like the word absolute, because it's sort of, that word has some sort of concreteness to it. You know, something's absolute. So, I mean, some people use that word, but I find it actually quite misleading. That absolute, that's the one real thing. Everything else is not real except that. That's not correct. So yes, you sometimes see that, but personally I find the word absolute can be misleading. So what does it mean, or how are things existing dependently? How do things come into existence dependently? And here we can talk about that in three ways. The first way in which things exist dependently or come into existence dependently is they depend on causes and conditions. For example, this laptop here exists depending on causes and conditions. One of the very first conditions necessary was someone had to design this laptop. And then, of course, all the various raw materials needed to be gathered. They needed to be refined. All the various components needed to be manufactured. All of those components assembled. And then, of course, all the people and factories involved in the process also necessary. So all of those causes and conditions were necessary for us to have this laptop here today. I think that's fairly straightforward. There's nothing too complicated in this idea. Then we have that things exist depending on their parts. So again, using this laptop exists depending on its various parts. The metal frame, the screen, the buttons, the electronic components. Without all of these parts, there would be no laptop. So again, it depends on all the parts. So again, that's fairly straightforward. But what we're saying here is that this reasoning, the fact that things are dependent, should be overturning our idea that things are independent. But probably for most of us, we are quite happy to accept that this laptop depends on causes and conditions. It also depends on its parts. But at the same time, we're probably happy to accept that when we walk in the door, there's already a laptop existing here on the table. Is that true? Mm-hmm. But that shouldn't be possible, because this idea here should be overturning the idea that things are independently existent. But it doesn't seem to have that effect. Why? I think the reason is our understanding of these two things is fairly superficial. To understand these two ideas at a deeper level, we have to go to the third way in which things exist dependently. That things exist depending on imputation, labeling, conception. So these three words are saying the same thing. There's three words for the same thing. So if you understand one of those words, you understand all three. And again, often when we look at that, we think, I know what that means. That means there's a thing there we're calling a laptop. Again, that's a fairly superficial understanding. To try to understand this at a deeper level, what we can understand is actually when we look out on the world, we just receive a mass of sense data, particularly through the visual sense. And of course, we have to make some sense or meaning out of all of this data that we receive. Otherwise, we can't function. So what we do is we group various collections of data into, we draw lines around collections of data and make that collection of data into a single object. So we draw lines in all of this data and we create objects so that we can make some sense or meaning out of this. Otherwise, we couldn't function. But we do more than this because we live in a world with others. To be able to communicate, we then have to give names to these things. But already when we've drawn the line and created the object, we've already effectively done this. Just putting the name is just adding the icing to the cake. Now, how we divide up the world is not fixed. It's completely arbitrary, depending on the meaning that we want to get out of the world. For example, how many things are there? How many? Depends on us, doesn't it? I mean, we could draw one line around all that data and say there's one object there, it's a star. Or we could draw two lines and say there's two triangles there. Or we could draw 6 lines and say there's 6 triangles. Or we could draw 7 lines and say there's 6 triangles and a hexagon there. Or we could do just 18 lines and say there's actually 18 lines there. We decide how many things are there. There's not a star there existing from its own side, independent of our conceptual framework. We bring the star into existence through drawing a line, creating that star through that data. So therefore, what we often say then is that things are not findable. So not findable means you will not find a star here amongst the bases, because the star comes into existence through our conceptual framework. There's no star to be found here from the side of the basis. So often we see in this, it says things are not findable. That's what it means. You cannot find the object in the basis. Also, we often hear the term then, things are merely labeled. Merely, of course, means just or only, meaning that objects have no higher or stronger level of existence than only being labeled, only existing within our conceptual framework. There is no object existing from its own side independent of our conceptual framework. This is what merely labeled means. Based on this understanding of what it means for things to be existing through imputation, labeling, or conception, let's go back to the 2 points about causes and conditions and parts and try to understand them based on this idea, what that really means. So this is a timeline. This is a seed, and this is the plant or sprout that it produces. So we said that the plant exists depending on causes and conditions. So cause means substantial cause, the underlying cause, which of course is a seed. So seed is the cause of the plant, and the conditions are soil, sunlight, water, and so forth. So all of those conditions are necessary for that seed to transform into the plant. Now, of course, we believe or grasp onto things existing independently, independent of our conceptual framework. The question is, when does a seed become the plant in this process? If things exist independent of our conceptual framework, it should be a fixed, obvious point where the seed becomes the plant. So where does the seed become the plant in this process? Who can tell me?
You have the sprout in between the seed and the plant.
No, this is a sprout.
Oh, that's the sprout. Okay, I thought that was a big
No,
tree.
no,
okay.
no. So where does the seed become the plant or the sprout?
Yeah, okay.
Where?
Yeah.
Don't we decide? The seed becomes the plant at the point where this configuration of data stops looking like our concept of seed and starts looking like our concept of plant. And of course, our individual concepts of seed and plants are slightly different. So for some of us, it'll be here, for some of us here, maybe some of us here. We decide when the plant comes into existence. Another point here that can be helpful. The seed and the plant are in a cause and effect relationship. And by definition, anything in a cause and effect relationship cannot exist at the time of the result, by definition, if they're in a cause and effect relationship. They cannot exist simultaneously. So the question is here, does the seed cease existing before the plant comes into existence? So don't blurt out an answer yet, think about it. Does the seed stop existing before the plant comes into existence? There can only be two answers, yes or no. Which is it? Yes or no? Does the seed stop existing before the plant comes into existence? Yes or no?
Yes.
No.
No.
If you say no, it means that the seed exists at the same time as the plant, which is illogical, cannot happen by definition. So no is illogical. If you say yes, the seed has ceased to exist, where is the plant coming from? Yes is illogical. Both no and yes are illogical. So actually, if we believe in independent existence, simple concepts like cause and result become illogical. They cannot work. Cannot work. In fact, great Indian master Nagarjuna from the 2nd century, in his classic text, fundamental wisdom of the middle way, he has 27 chapters of these sorts of arguments. You believe in independent existence? What about cause and result? What about agent and action, fire and fuel? How does that work? And then we go, oh, actually, it doesn't work, does it? So this can help undermine the idea that things exist independently. As soon as we make things into discrete objects, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. It just does not work. It becomes completely illogical. Another point here. We say that the plant exists depending on the seed. In other words, the result exists depending on the cause. But this view is also saying the cause depends on the result. How does the cause depend on the result? How does the cause depend on the result?
Because the plant produces the seeds.
No. It does, but that's not the answer.
Because it wouldn't be a cause if there wasn't a plant in the end.
Exactly. You can't call something a cause unless you have the idea result. You can't call something a seed unless you have the idea plant. Whether or not it produces is irrelevant. So you can only have seeds or causes if you have the idea plant or result. So the cause depends on the result as well. So that is the plant. Now, normally for my other demonstration, now I have a little pen. Does anyone have a pen that I can sort of pull apart that goes into bits? Okay. So we say that the pen exists depending on its parts. But is there a pen to be found here in the basis? Can you find a pen from the side of the basis? Is this, oh, there's a bits inside here. No, it doesn't come out. Okay. Is this a pen? Is this a pen? Is this a pen? Is this plastic tube a pen? Is the ink inside a pen? Is the round ball on the end a pen? Is the other piece of metal a pen? Where's the pen? And people go, oh, that's easy. The pen is the collection of that stuff. There's your pen. Is that a pen? Oh, no. It has to be a certain shape. So you have to tell me when the pen comes into existence. Oh.
Can I ask something? Couldn't it be a pen?
Wait.
If you can write with the plastic
Wait.
thing.
Getting there.
Pen.
Close.
Close. So from that, when does a pen come into existence? It comes into existence when this configuration of data closely enough resembles our concept of pen. And our concepts have usually at least two parts, appearance and functionality. So when this appears to look like our concept of pen close enough, and it seems to function according to our concept of pen, then there's a pen. If the pen is findable in the basis, if the pen exists from its own side, it would mean that if a caveman came in here, he'd pick it up and start writing with it. But I think if a caveman came in, maybe see some sort of weapon to stab animals with. And then, of course, if a dog came in here, the dog may see some sort of chewing stick. And then if a tiny little ant came here, may see some sort of home to live in. So is this a pen, a weapon, a chewing stick, or a home? From its own side, it's none of those things. From the side of the observer, it's all of those things. So we bring the pen into existence. Pen exists depending on conceptual framework. So normally we say this is a pen. So what we've done is there's a basis there. We have a label pen, concept pen, and what we've done is we've stuck the concept to the basis. and we say this is a pen. But is the concept the basis? No. So saying this is a pen is very misleading. Correctly, technically correct, you should say pen is what I'm labeling onto that basis. So therefore, the pen is not the collection of parts. The pen is merely labeled depending on the collection of parts. So if we can understand those two statements are not saying the same thing, we're starting to understand something about emptiness. So there's two statements again are, the pen is the collection of the parts versus the pen is merely labeled depending on the collection of the parts. Big difference. Also here, we say that the pen exists depending on its parts, or in other words, the whole depends on the parts, but also the part depends on the whole. Same reasoning. You can only call this a part of a pen if you have the idea pen. Whether or not pen exists is irrelevant. So this is how we are to understand causes and conditions and parts based on the idea of things being merely labeled. So any questions?
But is it the same with the self? If the self is defined as a collection of all your thoughts, all your emotions, all your sense perception from you are born. So yeah, and then again the parts, which let's say that it's a rubber around it. So it's collected as one sense of entity.
So again, we're going to see when this idea of emptiness is often described in the text, they often describe it in this way using some physical object because it's easier to understand. It's sort of some visible, tangible thing. So actually in one of the classic Indian texts that is studied when we study this idea of emptiness from Chandrakirti, he uses the idea of a cart, you know, a wooden cart. And he sort of pulls it apart and goes, where's the cart, you know? But then when we come to meditate, it's very much recommended to focus on ourselves as a person, because that's where things start to go wrong, is we wrongly grasp onto the basis of the person as the person. So that's what we're going to start to look at in the next session. And then also tomorrow morning, we're going to work with the idea of person. But to give you a brief answer on this is, again, the problem is this idea of identification or fusion, you could use another word. We have the basis, we have the label, pen. What we do is we fuse the two together and we say this is a pen. We're identifying the label with the basis, when in fact the label is applied to the basis. The label is not the basis. The label is applied to the basis. Yeah? But that's not how we think and speak and relate. We relate as if this is a pen, that the pen exists there from its own side, rather than understanding that pen is something existing within our conceptual framework that we're applying to this basis. So similarly with the person, we have the basis of the person, which is the body and the mind. We have the label person, or me, or whatever label you want to use. And of course, correctly, we are applying the label me to the basis. But what we do, of course, is we identify the label with the basis. We say, this is me. That the me is the body and mind, as the pen is the collection of parts. And that's where we go wrong. So again, intellectually, we can sort of maybe understand that me is a label we're applying to the body and the mind, but is that how we see ourselves when we interact in the world? No. We think me here. This is me. That's false. And so that's what we're going to be looking at next session and tomorrow morning. Any more questions about any of this?
I'm just,
Yeah.
I mean, intellectual again, understandable, but again, if you kind of dissolve all the concepts.
Dissolve.
Dissolve.
No, you don't. We're not dissolving concepts. What we're understanding is we're understanding concepts to be concepts.
Okay.
We need to use concepts, otherwise we couldn't function.
No, that's
So what we need to do is to understand concepts as concepts and not as things. That's the problem. We don't understand pen is a concept, person is a concept that we're using to apply to some basis. That's the problem. Concepts themselves are not problems.
But why is it a problem?
Ah, we can go back to our suffering and its causes chart, no?
Yes.
No? Why is it a problem?
We get attachment to it.
Because when we look at those flowers and we have a pleasant experience, that's beautiful flowers.
Yes. But if I need a pen, I will need it no matter if it's called a pen or not labeled, or if it's only parts, because I need to write something.
Correct.
So how can that help me get over my attachment to writing this message or whatever it is I need to write? I still have, I need a pen.
So there's two things. There's two things here.
Yes.
There is the correct conventional mind, which understands pen, so we can write with it. So that's fine, you know, pen, we write with it, flower, so forth. No problem there. We have to do that.
Yeah.
Then on top of that conventional mind, there is a mind that then grasps onto how all of these things exist. That's the problem. So the problem is not pen. The problem is that we have a mind as well that goes, that pen is existing independent of me. The mind that says pen is a valid mind. The mind that says independent pen is an invalid mind. That's the one that gets us into trouble. The mind that correctly identifies pen does not get us into trouble. In fact, it's helpful and necessary.
Okay. So what kind of problems will happen when you consider pen being independent?
Again, if you see it independent, exactly what this chart says is that pen is probably not a very clear example because it usually doesn't evoke any reaction. But let's say it's a very beautiful pen, gold pen.
Something you maybe got from
it's your grandmother's
yes,
pen that
something
you
like
got inherited.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So you get desperate because somebody takes it from you
Exactly.
and you kill that person.
Why?
Okay.
Yeah, because my pen.
Yeah.
Someone's taken my pen.
Okay, thank you. I understand, thank you.
Yeah.
But just about this me as a concept.
Right.
If can concepts act, because you were asking us to look in and see who the one who's telling, is there me telling the body to relax?
Right.
Is
So
it in the body? And the same with the mind. So if I'm thinking that me is a label, can that label
okay. Well, it's not so we've only just started to explain. I think your question is going to be answered in the next session, but very brief, and then we'll go tea break, is that one of the difficulties with this view is now we only see two possibilities. Either there is this real independent pen that works, or there's no pen. Because we've never seen any other sort of pen. We've only related to one that seems to exist there independent of us. That's the one that seems to work, and that's it. There it is. But then when we investigate and we start to undermine this, then we go, whoa, there's no pen at all. And then we fall to the other extreme of nihilism. So this view, and this view is coming from the Buddhist philosophical school called Madhyamika, which means middle way, is we're trying to find the middle way between those two extremes. We don't even entertain the possibility that there's a third option. Either they're real, independent and functioning, or they don't exist. We don't see any other possibility. We have to find that thin line between there. That's what this view is all about. And we're going to start to look at that in more detail in the next session. But now it's time for a tea break.